March is known for the end of winter and the arrival of springtime, a season of warmth and renewal. For history buffs, it's also known for the date Julius Caesar met his last. But don't let time pass you by like a bunch of old Romans. Hello again, SA here. And I'm just here to remind you to get your copy of my book series, Glitch. It's available on Barnes & Noble and other fine bookstores, as well as Amazon. The links are down below in the description. And while you're out enjoying the spring weather, you can also indulge in my story of a kidnapped teen model and a reluctant jewel thief who are on the run from the law. Yeah, you don't have to guess. I still have other books coming down the pike. So as long as I don't run into any difficulties. You'll be seeing those books too, I'm sure. Now let's get back to the video. Hello again, SA here. Since the early days of the internet, people always found things they could do with it, such as sending email or looking for porn. But one of the things people were start using the internet for was videos, or video streaming, or video hosting. Indeed, one of the first internet websites for such purposes was a website called Share Your Video back in the late 90s, and it was followed by another site called iFilm. But video sharing or streaming didn't really, go crazy until the advent of YouTube. Back during the days of George W. I think it was 2004, 2005, sometime around that period. And then, of course, there was MySpace and whatnot. And of course, as we all know, YouTube was followed by Daily Motion, BitChute, Rumble, and oh my God, so many others. I can't keep up with all of them. But anyway, the funny thing about these video hosting sites is the content. Now, of course, the big joke about YouTube was that in those early days, the only videos you saw on there was cat videos. And of course, if you're into cats, then of course that was your site. But then the various microblog sites got in on the act. Yeah, that's right, Twitter and Minds. But the thing is, sometimes people don't like what's posted on these sites, and they get the feathers all ruffled, and they say, I don't like this. And I'm thinking, yeah, well, you don't have to watch it. That's fair. I mean, that's the basic general presumption that was back with good old-fashioned terrestrial television. I mean, if you didn't want to watch Archie Bunker, you didn't want watch reruns of The Family Feud, you didn't have to watch it. But then, of course, anyone who remembers the old TV show Soap with Robert Guillaume, that was on back in the late 70s, early 80s, around 1980s. Well, that was probably the first time enough people complained about a program and actually had it banned. No joke. Yeah, if I remember correctly, I think it was Jerry Falwell and his moral minority group. Yeah, they wrote enough angry letters to ABC that they got the show taken off the air. We know about that. But and of course in the internet world, yeah, that became a thing too. And indeed, YouTube, which has been around about almost 20 years now, they didn't start banning people until like sometime during the later half of Obama. And of course, anyone who knows YouTube knows that the funny thing about YouTube is that sometimes people's videos will be banned for seemingly no reason. None. Zero. No joke. Indeed. I remember a story that during from the quartering, that big dude mentioned where somebody who had a YouTube channel where he was just, singing the praises of Bitcoin had his channel banned. And he couldn't understand why. He didn't get no warnings. He didn't get no citations, nothing. Just one day he woke up and his channel was gone. He couldn't understand. He said, what's the deal? And then, of course, he found out later the reason why. Because around this time, YouTube got bought up by Google, a.k.a. Alphabet, that big company. And Alphabet, at the time, wanted to start their own crypto. But some the executives said that, well, if we're going to start our own crypto, we can't have any competition. And therefore, a conscious decision was made to say, okay, all these people peddling all these damn various competing cryptocurrencies, we got to get them off our platform. And that's like what they did. Because it wasn't just one guy. It was all of them. Just erased right off of YouTube. Gone. And then this is this is the part that's probably going to be really irksome. The damn people at Google Central had change of heart and they didn't follow through with making the crypto after all. So now these people lost their damn YouTube channels promoting cryptocurrencies, and because these people at Google Central thought it was going to be they didn't want the competition, and then they turn around and say, "Oh, we're not going to follow through with our proposed cryptocurrency after all." Well, ain't that a laugh? Well, guess what? Anyone who's seen, familiar with video hosting sites knows that depending on who's running that site, you can end up on their shit list pretty fast if you post something that they don't like. Indeed, anyone who remembers during the Trump era knows that a lot of people were banned for the most nonsensical reasons. I mean, like sample, Hope Tip Jesus. You probably don't know him. He's a internet personality. He got banned from Twitter just by saying, "Hey, dude," and you say that sounds nonsensical. Yeah, it is. Except the person he was talking to was one of those so-called trans people, and the trans person got really offended because Hope Tip Jesus wasn't using their pronouns. So they went screaming to Jack Dorsey and had Hope Tip Jesus kicked off their platform. I mean, really, dude? I mean, really? And of course, all those people who were Trump supporters, yeah, they got kicked off of everything. YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, the works, including Trump himself. And then finally, TikTok showed up. And TikTok, I guess it's a new kid on the block. And man, according to their own website, it's only been around since 2016. But apparently, the damn people on TikTok, they'll ban you just as quick if you say something that they don't like. Don't believe me? Ask Tim Pool how long he lasted on TikTok. Yeah, not very. Or that big dude, Jennifer the Quartering. Same thing. He said he was on TikTok for a while, but then when he said something that they didn't like, they kicked him off of their website as well. What they say, they don't know. But apparently someone at TikTok Central didn't like it, and they said, get the hell out of Dodge. And that was the end of that. Well, now the federal government is stepping in. And they said that, you know what, we don't like what's on TikTok. And except since the federal government doesn't control TikTok, they say, we want to run TikTok. And you say, wait, what? Yeah. Because anyone who's been paying attention knows that currently Congress has a bill that officially bans TikTok from the United States, but if you actually look at it, it really doesn't ban it. It basically gives the people at the Bike Dance, which technically is the parent company of TikTok, ultimatum. You hand over the keys to your kingdom within 60 days, otherwise you can't operate within the borders of the United States. And of course, at that point, you say, wait, what? Yeah. Now, of course, if you read the fine print, it says that you have to hand over TikTok to what the federal government refers to as an approved third party. And of course, that doesn't pass the smell test at all because it doesn't name who that third party is. But I can probably presume it's probably someone who is real friendly with the security services as well as the deep state inside the United States. And then, of course, at that point, you say, oh, yep, that's right. So this so-called TikTok ban is not really a ban at all. Apparently, you have a bunch of government goombas who don't like the fact that TikTok is operating in the United States, and let's not pretend TikTok is a really big deal in the United States. No joke. No bullshit. How big is it? Well, according to their website, it's available in 40 languages, and according to the most recent data, over 140 million people have downloaded the app. That's almost like half the population of the United States. Now, of course, I'm not on TikTok because, well, I'm just not in that sort of thing. So there you go. But a lot of people are. And of course, anyone who's ever watched Libs of TikTok knows that a lot of people who are on TikTok, let's just say they lost their marbles a long time ago. No joke. I mean, just look up the Twitter feed of Libs of TikTok and you'll see a whole bunch of lunacy and outrageousness from people who you wouldn't invite in your house. No joke. But then you'll say, well, if this damn TikTok's been around for what, 8 years now, why is the federal government getting beat up their nose now? Well, according to Tucker Carlson and Rand Paul, it's apparently about control. Apparently, they don't like the fact that the federal government has no control over the message. And of course, anyone who was familiar with what was going on back during the Trump era knows that for a brief period there, they definitely were controlling the message. In other words, if you, for example, during the coup, remember that? If you said anything like, I don't know about this damn vaccine, boom, banned. Or if you said that I think that this damn COVID came from a laboratory in China and not from some stupid wet market, bam, you're banned. And you say, oh, well, that was just Facebook and that was just old Jack Dorsey. No, it wasn't. That was the FBI and that was the CIA. Let's not even pretend, okay? All those bannings that was happening, that was the federal government doing the banning. In other words, it was basically almost like something out of Renaissance Italy. What they used to refer to back in those days as the iron fist covered by the velvet glove. The iron fist being the federal government, the velvet glove being Jack Dorsey and Zuckerberg or Zuckerborg. And now they're setting their sights on TikTok. And they're basically giving the people in China an ultimatum. Even though, from what I've read, the funny thing about TikTok is that it's kind of has a real diverse ownership. Yeah. I mean, technically it is a Chinese company because ByteDance, it technically owns the company, but ByteDance, it's kind of it's kind of diffused. In other words, they have employees scattered all over the place. So it may have started out as a Chinese company, but it's probably no longer exclusively a Chinese company. Indeed, some of the servers actually are for the damn stupid app actually are here inside the United States. And according to the corporate structure, TikTok is technically incorporated in the Cayman Islands, and it has headquarters in both Singapore and in Los Angeles, even though ByteDance is still located in Beijing. So there you go. And of course, I'm going to show you a quick snippet of a little conversation that Tucker Carlson had with Ron Paul. And believe me, Ron Paul, he thinks that this whole damn anti-TikTok deal has nothing to do with TikTok at all. It has to do everything to do with, I'll let them tell you themselves, okay? Here we go.
The majority of House Republicans, amazingly, just aligned with the Biden administration on one of its top priorities to ban the social media app TikTok. This amounts to the most far-reaching act of censorship in the history of the United States. It's an attack on the right of American citizens to receive their information from any source they choose. Most of us believe that was a fundamental right. But of course, almost no one in Washington will admit that that's happening. That's not at all what's going on, they tell us. No. Instead, they're framing what's very obviously censorship as an act of self-defense against a foreign adversary. And if that sounds familiar, it should be. It's the same rationale they used to spy on Donald Trump, among other things, once they designated him a tool of Russia. And as always, they're doing all of this in the bluntest, least restrained terms, because it's your fault, actually. Quote, voting against the bill is a vote for the Chinese Communist Party, proclaimed neocon Congressman Dan Crenshaw, the Nikki Haley of Texas. Quote, the opponents of this bill aren't defending free speech. They're defending Chinese access to American data and American minds. Not a good look. You're a bad American if you don't agree with me, says Dan Crenshaw. And the rest of the liars said similar things, and maybe some of them believed it. That is possible, given the median IQ in the Congress. But just for a moment, let's consider their argument rationally. Let's just assess it for a moment. The federal government very much wants to protect us and our children from China. That's what they're telling us. Now, let's assume for a moment that that's true. And let's further assume that the Chinese government is, in fact, a greater threat to our happiness and well-being than our own government is. That's a stretch if you think about it. In fact, it's totally unsupported by evidence of any kind. But for the sake of argument, let's just stipulate that that is, in fact, true. So if you were in charge, how would you go about protecting the United States from China? Let's see. The first thing you would do is prevent the CCP from buying American farmland and controlling our food supply. That way, the Chinese government, a government they claim is our greatest enemy, would not have the power to starve our population to death. That would be key. You get right on that. Of course, you'd also want to make sure that the CCP had zero control over our water, or energy or communications infrastructure, basic elemental things, things you couldn't live without. You wouldn't want the Chinese anywhere near those things. You would not allow it. Those would be the first priorities on your list. And then you would make certain that the Chinese didn't control your economy. You would not, for example, export your entire industrial base to China, simultaneously making them rich and you poor. You would not do that. Nor would you allow them to hold a meaningful portion of your debt. That would be reckless as hell. You wouldn't allow the Communist Party of China to send billions to your most prestigious universities, thereby gaining control of the minds of the next generation of your leaders. And needless to say, you would not allow Chinese citizens by the tens of thousands to invade your country over your southern border. That would be insane. You would furthermore keep Chinese citizens out of medical, scientific, and R&D facilities. You definitely would not fund their biolabs or cover up for them when they unleashed killer viruses on the world. No, you wouldn't. Why would you do that? And then on questions of foreign policy, you would not spend a ton of time worrying about Taiwan. It's far away, and honestly, who cares? No. Because you don't have all the money in the world or all the time in the world, you would narrow down your priorities, and you would spend your energy and military might on your own hemisphere, where you and your population actually live. The people you want to protect, they live in the Western Hemisphere. So you would not allow the Chinese government to colonize pretty much every country in the Americas, including Canada and Mexico. No. And you certainly wouldn't let the Chinese, of all people, build the infrastructure in places that you directly control, like the supposedly American Virgin Islands, where the roads are paid for by China. That would be crazy and humiliating and very easy to stop. You wouldn't have to put up with that, so you wouldn't put up with it, not for a second. And just to make sure that China understood you're doing all you could to protect your own people, because that was really your goal, because being Dan Crenshaw, you really care about your own people and your own country. Because of that, you would immediately shoot down any spy balloon from China that floated over Montana. Obviously, that's some of what you would do. And yet, somehow, the U.S. government, even Dan Crenshaw, who really cares about your children, protecting them from China, has done none of that and has no plans to do any of that ever. So China still makes our antibiotics and our vitamins. But what Dan Crenshaw is doing is banning a social media app. And probably not the first social media app Dan Crenshaw will call for banning, or the Biden administration, with the help of Republican leaders, will try to ban. So what is this about? Well, it's not about China. It may be about other foreign countries. It's definitely not about China, because pay no attention to what they say. Watch carefully what they do. Rand Paul of Kentucky, who's of course a sitting United States senator, seems to be one of the very few in Washington who's watching what they do, not what they say. And so he is opposing this effort to ban a social media app, not because he is a tool of China, though of course they're doubtless calling him that now, but because he is a dot connector from way back. And we are honored to have him join us now. Senator, thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Tucker.
I'll go ahead and presume to speak for you, too. I don't think most people are really that in favor of TikTok or the Chinese government. I assume you're not. I'm definitely not. But Republican leaders seem to believe two things that contradict one another. One, they believe that, on some evidence, that Joe Biden is like kind of controlled by China and that Joe Biden is pushing transgenderism. And yet, and that is true, but they're aligning with Joe Biden, who is suddenly claiming that TikTok is bad because it's too Chinese and it's pouring filth into the minds of our children. Now, he can't be sincere about that, obviously, so why would they be joining him in this? Do you have any idea?
You know, my concern has always been with the centralization of power, with giving up power. I don't care whether it's a Republican or a Democrat president.
Amen.
I don't want any president to have the power to ban apps that are sold on an app store. And that's essentially what this is going to happen. 180 million Americans put dance videos up and whatever else is on TikTok, and they choose the terms of those services the same way people on Facebook do. And does Facebook scrape your data? Sure. Does Google scrape your data? Do all of these giant tech companies scrape your data? They all take your data. But the thing is there are now accusations. They say, oh, TikTok's owned by the Chinese government. The Chinese communists own it. Well, that's not even true. You can't say stuff just over and over again that's not true. TikTok is owned by about 60% of it's owned by international investors from all over the world. 20% is owned by the two Chinese software engineers that created the app. and 20% is owned by the employees of TikTok, which 7,000 of them are Americans. So there's a significant nexus of Americans in the ownership, and then there's a significant nexus of Americans using this. And they say, oh, well, the Chinese government owns it. It's just frankly not true. Now, the company that owns TikTok also owns something like TikTok that is censored, and the Chinese let that be broadcast throughout China. The Chinese government does have a member of the board. It's called Douyin. It's the Chinese TikTok. But they don't have a member of the board of ByteDance. They don't control ByteDance, and the data is now kept in Oracle Cloud, centered in Texas. And this has been done because the company wants to try to exist. It's a very popular app. It has a great deal of value, so they're doing anything they can to comply. And yet the hysterics in the House are just, shut them down, communism this, communism that. Look,
Okay, now I'm going to leave a link down below that way you can watch the whole Tucker Carlson interview with Ron Paul. But I agree with Ron Paul. This has nothing to do with TikTok. This has nothing to do with Elon Musk and Twitter. Because if they actually push this law through and they actually have it passed the way it's written, they could come down the road and basically do the same thing to Elon Musk. Tell him to hand over the keys of Twitter, otherwise you're going to get in a lot of trouble, Mr. South African immigrant. And wait for it. Are you ready? Trump's Truth Social. Yeah, no joke. Because the funny thing about Trump's Truth Social is that it's kind of opaque about exactly who owns the company that's basically the parent company of Truth Social. But from what I read, it's not all 100% Trump. I mean, yeah, he's the biggest guy on Truth Social, but he doesn't own it outright. And if there are any foreigners who have a piece of Truth Social, the way this damn law is written, they could come basically to Truth Social and tell them that you better hand over the keys of Truth Social within 60 days. We're going to take the company from you, and or have you banned outright. And then you sit there and say, "Oh, yep, that's right." So this damn new law they're trying to push through has really only partially had to do with TikTok. It's all about controlling the message. And wait for it, you ready? Since the Biden administration looks like they're going to lose this upcoming election, what makes you think that they wouldn't try, if this is not their grand play? Because anyone who remembers what happened in 2020 knows that the funny thing about leftists and liberals in the DNC is they don't like losing elections. And because they were able to control the message back in 2020, what makes you think they don't want to control the message in 2024? And how do you do that? By taking over social media. By brute force. No joke. So yeah, this rule that they're trying to push through Congress, yeah, it may have TikTok's name written on it, but it's not just about TikTok. Just like the old Ripley's Believe It or Not TV show used to say, don't you believe it. Don't. Well, that's all I have to say about this federal government scheme to hijack all social media. And that's my opinion.